better movie they could have made, Windmill 65. This is a story really about our community. And to me, how did this get here? It took a lot of people. So I gave it a cast, a starring cast. Carter Brown, some of you might know, I will talk a little about him. I called him the dreamer. He was the guy with the dream behind getting the windmill here. Bill Wickers, Logan Wickers, was Mr. Everything. We'll talk a little bit about his role in the Holland Museum, Windmill Island, and everything else around the city. Nels Bosman, the mayor at the time, the younger mayor, was very supportive of the project and made sure it got here. And then Ari de Koning was a man we'll talk about quite a bit. He was the technical advisor for the Dutch Mill Society that helped us procure a mill, take down the mill, put back up the mill, find a good place for the mill here in America, so he was very supportive of this project. And then Diek Medendorp, who was the millwright, who was in charge of taking down the windmill in the Netherlands and putting it back up. And it's really neat, I should mention, if you saw back in the display, the museum has in their archives the film of the windmill getting taken down in 1964 in the Netherlands and then getting built back here in America. It's just really cool to see. We had the images, but we hadn't seen the film before not too long ago. At least I hadn't. It's been kind of buried for a while. So Diek Medendorp was the man who did that. And then I have Jaap de Blecourt, the original manager of Windmill Island. He was actually, weirdly enough, kind of the second manager, and we'll talk about that. But he was in his debut. And then there's a lot of other people who helped make that happen. We'll talk about as we go through the story. A lot of names here, some you recognize, some you might not, and what roles they play. So really, the man behind it, I mentioned Carter Brown. He was a man really known about town. We were kind of neighbors. I lived south of town, Lake Town Township, and he lived right down there too. But he lived in Castle Park. I don't live in Castle Park. I live in a nice ranch home. But Carter Brown was known. He managed Castle Park for years, from 1917 to 1973. It was actually, Castle Park was started back in 1892 by a man named Michael Schwartz out of Chicago. And then Carter Brown's uncle, John Parr, took it over and then passed it off to Carter Brown. But he built that up. It's amazing. This is not about Castle Park, but you could do a deep dive into Castle Park as well, the history and what Mr. Brown did there. Well, he was one of those guys, I think, again, I call him the dreamer because he just kind of said, you know what we need here? Why does Holland not have a windmill? They have tulips, they have Dutch stuff. What about a windmill? And he was also a guy who, from what I read, didn't take no for an answer. Jaap can tell you, I can tell you, we get a lot of people that say, you know what you should do? And I'm always fearful to hear what I should do because oftentimes it's a big, bold idea. And Mr. Brown, I think, was one of those people, but he was not going to let it go of you should get a windmill from the Netherlands and bring it here. He didn't realize how hard that would be at the time, but he made it happen. He did put a committee around himself called the Windmill Committee, which grew from a group of about 4 or 5 guys up until Sarah was telling me about 16 people, and it being some women and men here in town who made it happen. Some of the people who were involved, let me back up, Nels Bosman, the mayor. I should have put his picture back up here. Let me go back to his picture. He was mayor of Holland from 1961 through 70, and he made a lot of stuff happen. Those of you who remember him, he was one of the founders of HEDCOR, the Holland Area Development Corporation. They started the Human Relations Commission here in Holland at the time. He helped serve on the Netherlands Museum Board. They annexed Holland Heights and a lot of what's now the city of Holland into the city during his mayorship. He was also involved in launching WHTC. So he was a very busy man. A lot of guys at this time, we need more guys like that, right? Who will take on like 6 different projects and excel at them all. But he was one of them. He also had, one of the other guys was Henry Mace, the head of Holland State Bank, and Herb Holt, who was the city manager at the time. He was Holland's 2nd city manager. But really, who they needed involved, this might be a little small, I don't know if you can read in the back there. This is from the castle. There we go. This is from Castle Park. Let's see what's this from. This is from Castle Park, and it's from Carter Brown to Bill Wickers. And he says, "Dear Mr. Wickers, we need your advice and support in Project Windmill. So won't you come to a buffet supper meeting at the castle on Tuesday, October 3. This is the way they got Bill Wickers involved. Bill Wickers, they knew we want to get a windmill from the Netherlands, and Bill Wickers, they brought him, so here's a picture. of the early Windmill Committee, but he was the man that knew could make it happen. So we have, so we have Nelson Bosman here, the mayor, Mr. Carter Brown, Beryl Wickers, Henry Meigs. And if anybody knows who this guy is, it's a mystery. He must have been someone important, someone talking about the early part of the Windmill. We don't know who he is. We looked him up. And if you know, come find me afterwards. But they got Bill Wickers involved. So Bill Wickers, again, I kind of termed him Mr. Everything. I'm excited. Grace, his assistant, is actually here tonight, so we get a connection and a link with him. But he was, when we got to talk about this presentation tonight, it really made sense because he was really the guy who was behind Windmill Island, who got the windmill in the Netherlands. He was also the guy who started the Netherlands Museum, and then, which you know is the Holland Museum. He was head of the Netherlands Information Society here in West Michigan. He originally, let's see, I put my notes here, 1932, graduated from Hope College. 1935, became the director of the Michigan Historical Records Survey. 1937, opened the Netherlands Pioneer and Historical Foundation at Dimden Chapel, which became the Holland Museum. 1940, the Netherlands Museum opens. 1941, the Netherlands Information Bureau was established by the government in exile, and he convinced them to head up the Midwest branch the next year. He managed Tulip Time for 5 years. That's a business in itself. He helped launch WHTC. And one of the coolest stories is he also was at the helped with the Reformed Church in America after World War II. I'm sure Grace can tell you lots about this. When immigrants from the Netherlands, they had a lot of people who needed to come over here. Their country was devastated by World War II, and then they had a large flood in 1953 that destroyed a lot of the southern provinces. They had a lot of people who needed homes and who saw a better life in America. There was a lot of restrictions on immigration. And one of the things was they needed sponsors for all of these people. Each person needed to have a sponsor to say, yes, I vouch for this person when they come to America. If they mess up, I'll be it's my rear that'll be on the line for it. I've heard a tale that Mr. Wickers, he found sponsors or created sponsors. Somehow that everyone who needed a sponsor, Mr. Wickers made sure they had a sponsor come hell or high water. They all were some thousands of people here in the Midwest, Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa, can thank Mr. Wickers for bringing their family over here from the Netherlands. He arranged a couple of royal visits in 1952 and 1982. He was a trustee of Hope College. He was a Knight of the Order of Roman Nassau. So he was Sir Bill Wickers in the Netherlands. But he did just tons and tons of stuff. But even he needed a little bit of help. So this guy here so we have Bill Wickers here on the right, and then we have Arie de Koning on the left. He was, again, the technical director of the Dutch Mill Society. So he was one of the guys who, interestingly enough, Bill Wickers got led all over the place. So it's interesting, there's a couple of the other names, I'm going to go back and actually put them in there, there's a couple of those other names. He had help and hurt. When Bill Wickers started his task, again, he was the guy. They said, Bill, find us a mill, go to the Netherlands, do what you need to, pull the strings you need to, get us a mill. There's a couple other people. David Hoffmeyer, he was actually the head of the Netherlands Information Society overall. He helped Mr. Wickers get in touch with all kinds of people that he needed to, both in the Netherlands, well, mostly in the Netherlands. Jan van Rooyen was the ambassador to the United States from the Netherlands. He was kind of the villain of the story. He said, don't bother, it's not going to happen. He pointed out in 1961, which is the year Bill Wickers was assigned to do this, if you remember, the Dutch passed a law called the Monument and Historic Buildings Act that said, no more. We've had enough of our cultural heritage destroyed and removed. Nothing else. Nothing goes. It all stays here in the Netherlands. Well, that's hard because the giant windmill is part of the cultural heritage. So those are now allowed to leave. So he said no. They didn't take that for an answer though. Then you have people like Toon Koop. Toon was he was a board member of the Dutch Mill Society, but he was actually the head of the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam as well. And he was very supportive of this. Oddly enough, the museum guy is like, sure, you can have one of our mills, bring it over to America, but he was very supportive. He was also a tourism guy. He was on the Amsterdam Tourism Board. So maybe he knew, I can help these guys get some tourism as well. But really, the key person in the Netherlands was Arie de Koning. He did hook up with the head of the Dutch Mill Society, Frederik Stockhausen, who literally wrote the book on windmills. That's still kind of the book today. but already knew all the mills in the Netherlands. He was a technical guy. Even when I've read some other places of mills that went to other countries or new built mills like they have out in Manitoba, he was involved in all of these. Again, I don't know when he slept, when he ate, or if he had a family, but he was busy. So he was a technical advisor. So we found this article, again, a little hard to read. It's in Dutch, in Molen for Bill. Most of you can know enough Dutch that know that says a mill for Bill. So this was, they were almost, it was in Het Parool, a Dutch newspaper, in May 12, 1962. They're kind of poking fun at Mr. Wickers here, because he took a trip to the Netherlands, and with the article, I know you can't read it, they talked about who is this Bill Wickers guy, this American, and they kind of say, he's a Dutchman who doesn't speak any Dutch. He comes from this town, Holland. Apparently his grandfather came from the Netherlands. They said, what is he, and the best part, he's got $50,000. So I'll read those who know Dutch, the last two sentences, it says, Mochten Molensje weten, schrijf een kaartje naar Bill Wickers. Do you have a mill? Write Bill Wickers, because he'll give you $50,000 for it. So, again, this is in 1961 or 62. So this is still early on in the process of him trying to find a mill. They went, and they mentioned in the article, they were looking more in the northern provinces of the Netherlands, places like Friesland and Groningen. They ended up finding a mill in the very southern part of the Netherlands, so not this one they thought originally. But I just wanted this article is fun to read because they're poking fun. And here comes an American with deep pockets full of guilders, and he's going to buy himself a mill. And sure enough, he did a couple of years later, so too bad. We got our mill. So he looked at a lot of mills I mentioned all over the Netherlands, ended up in North-Brabant, in a little village called Windmill, which it was neat. The city sent me and a cameraman over there several years ago. It's still a small town. We have a connection with them. They just opened a brand new windmill because they had called back in the 90s and asked to have this mill back. And they were told, no thank you. We spent a lot of money on this mill. We're going to keep it. But that town has now built a mill and cultural center called DeZwaan, kind of our sister mill now. So this is the mill as it was in the Netherlands. As you can see, it is different from our mill today. It was a mound mill, so it's built on kind of a hill there. I always like to show school groups. I can picture a few on this mill compared to the mill here, and they'll always say, that's not the same mill, because ours was fixed up quite a bit. This mill, a lot of work has been done. Elisa Crawford, one of our former millers, did a lot of research into the background of the mill. We know, I always tell people its original history is pretty murky, but we know by 1884 it was built in Winkel, in this condition here. Parts of it may or may not have been a sawmill and a water mill before then, but it was built for a family called DeZwaan, and they then gave it to their son-in-law, who was named Piet van Schijk. And they then gave it to his son, Willem. Willem van Schijk was the last owner. It was used up until World War II. There's a fun story. See this little church? What? See this little church here? It's a Catholic church that sits back there. Many of you may know the story. It's not an apocryphal story. It's a real story. They built the mill there in Winkel. Several years later, the Catholic Church built a church just upwind of the mill, blocking the mill, the wind they needed. So they took the mill down and moved it. And the mill owner, Mr. van Schijk, did not go to church for several weeks. He ended up back in church, but he moved it. But that is this church right here. This still, when you go visit the site of the mill, they brought me to the site of the mill. Sure enough, like 2 blocks away, there was a Catholic church still sitting there. So they had to move the mill. But World War II, the mill was pretty beat up, and then the mills were kind of going out of vogue at that time. The Netherlands was not an early adopter of the Industrial Revolution, but they had machinery by World War II. They did still use this mill, but during the war it got shot up. So the van Schijk, the family who owned it, they used it until then. And then they were looking, after the war, there were some funds available from the Marshall Fund and other things, money available to fix up cultural heritage. The problem is, this mill was right on the dividing lines. Winkel is a very small town. Think Borculo. Think Borculo. Where is Borculo? What city is Borculo in, if I were to ask you that? Is it in Hudsonville? Is it in Zeeland? Is it in Borculo? It's in Borculo. That's kind of how Winkel is. It's at the crossroads of all these towns, so it was never its own municipality. Well, guess what municipality is going to pay to fix up this mill? It's in Hudsonville, it's in Holland, so all these towns, Newland and the places around it, no one wanted to give any money to fix up this mill. So here you had a broken down mill, it was beat up, and the city bought it. So again, when I went over there, it was very neat. This lady here, her name was Nel van Skyke, Nel Hadis van Skyke. Her father was the last owner of the windmill in the Netherlands. So we're told. So it's great. She became my Nederlandse oma, my Dutch grandma, they called her. I got to interview her. I got some nice footage. This is actually her two daughters and her granddaughter who flies over. She's a flight attendant, so she's over here quite a bit. It was great to meet her. Her dad was the last owner of the mill. I have fun stories about her, but I won't move it on. So we always been told this was the last owner of the mill. Then we looked at, here's her dad here. If you watch the film, he and Mr. Wickers are the one who do the kind of early gang handshake so they get the mill. That seals the deal for the mill. But if you look at, this is the actual invoice for the mill, it does not say Van Skyke. It says Adrianos. Adrianos Brothers. It says sold to the Mayor's Committee, windmill project in the city of Holland. Wood and metal parts of the windmill DeZwaan, total 8,000 florins, 8,000 guilders. So we bought it for $2,800, basically, the equivalent today of $28,000, which is a screaming deal. I tell the Dutch people I know, if you know of any mill for $28,000, go buy it tomorrow. As many of them as you got. The neat thing, though, again, we have always been told, this family, last owners, last summer, this is the fun part of my job. Last summer, I got this picture sent to me from someone who worked in our visitors bureau. And I was like, okay, we have a lot of visitors about that age who come and take weird selfies at Windmill Island. And they said, no, this guy, his name is Theo. And his family was the last owner of the mill in the Netherlands. And I said, no, they weren't. This was. They owned it. Well, Theo, I was busy that day. I missed him at Windmill Island. I ended up catching him. This is on the deck at Coral Gables down in Saugatuck. They were on the way out of town, and I chased him down to Saugatuck and found him. Gave him a book and talked to him a little bit. So his family is actually Israel's family. And if you read the book that Elisa wrote about the history of Windmill Island, great history there, it kind of rags a little bit on the Adrianos family. It says that they kind of were these middlemen who were looking to make money off the windmill. And Theo said, absolutely not. He said, my family has been around. So this is his family's business. I don't even know. He's at this level here. So he is all the way up to his great whoever, Adrianos started this company. He was born in 1722. So this company's been around since the 1700s. They are millwrights. And what they started specializing in, he told me for years and years, his grandfathers and great-grandfathers fixed up mills all over the southern part of the Netherlands. And then, from 1920 to 1960, the company almost went under and the family was almost bankrupt because they stopped using windmills. So what do you need these guys for? No one's using windmills, why do they need a millwright? It wasn't until that law in 1961 that said cultural heritage, we're going to fix these things up. Business started coming back because there's a lot of broken down windmills to fix up. So he said, my family did not buy that windmill, DeZwaan. He said, we weren't looking to flip it and turn it around. He said, unfortunately, a lot of the mills, there's about 9,000 mills in the Netherlands, a lot of them were torn down. And what they did is they got all the parts and pieces and used those parts and pieces to rebuild all the other mills. So he said, yes, we tore down windmills, but it was to rebuild other ones. We weren't just trying to, there weren't the Padnos of the Netherlands, just scrapping everything. So he said, the book, he had the copy of the book, and he said, my family wasn't portrayed very fairly in that book. It went from the Van Skyke family, they sold it to the Adrianos family, but the Adrianos family sold it to the city. So that's technically who we bought it from. So this, the other thing they had, again, the 1961 law, though, so just finding a windmill and having cash in your pockets didn't guarantee that Mr. Wickers could come home with a windmill. He had to get approval from the Dutch government and the Dutch Mill Society. So this is, again, that's AJ de Koning, Arie de Koning. He's the technical advisor. He's the one who signed it here. Mr. Wickers, herewith we send you the permit for breakup of the windmill at Winkel with best wishes for your health and kindest regards. Bill Wickers was actually in the hospital when he got this note in the Netherlands. You can see the Red Cross Hospital in Den Haag, so he was laid up. But they got permission to take this windmill down. A lot of you know that story. The last one before this was in Aruba, and you can go there and enjoy drinks in it because it's now a bar in Aruba. So I think the city's going to send me there next year to experience it. That's my next goal. But again, so the city, June 11, 1964, is the right day in my notes. They bought it in 8,000 guilders, which is $2,800 at the time, $28,000 in today's currency. But then it took, as Jaap knows, $450,000 in city-issued bonds, which is a little controversial. That's equivalent to, again, if you do the math, inflation's gone up a little bit, it's 10 times. So that's $4.5 million in today's dollars. The city issued bonds for to purchase the windmill, take it down, put it back up, and then develop Windmill Island Gardens. And the cool thing is, to Jaap's credit, they paid them all back. It wasn't city tax dollars that paid them back. By 1985, those things were paid back 20 years. So Jaap's good for it. So if you need a loan, Jaap's good for it. So who did the work? So Ari de Koning, trying to get to the short end of the stick. We have some of the saddest pictures you will ever see. The pictures from Winkel, Mr. Wickers went. He's not in this picture, but this is Ari de Koning. They're on the deck of the windmill here. Basically, this is the closing ceremony of their windmill when they took it down. And there are pictures of some very sad crowd people. Because this would be like if, to take the windmill out of the way, this would be like if they came in and someone bought a lighthouse and they took it down. That's kind of like the icon of the community. It's the heart of it. So they're telling these people, yeah, we sold it to a bunch of Americans, or they opened as a tourist attraction in West Michigan. So Mr. Cohen got the short end of the stick, and he got to tell the community that the mill was going to be taken down. So here he is again. He actually got plans with, this is Deke Magendorf, who was the millwright in charge of taking the mill down. But then Ari de Koning was the man who was kind of the technical guy who drew up the plans for taking it down and rebuilding it. So Deke Magendorf, you can see him here. This is again, here's DeZwaan. This is our windmill that he's working on. And again, you can watch the film of him taking it down in the Netherlands. A lot of as many parts and pieces as could be salvaged came over. We still have questions. I just got an email last year about, is your wind shaft the original wind shaft? And I go, maybe, I don't know. What should it look like if it was original? There's still people who are interested in that kind of stuff in the Netherlands. So, meanwhile, we hop back across to America. Where do we build this mill? So, we have 6th Street here. Here is the old Riverview Park with the baseball stadium, the old dump. This is where Windmill Island is now. The original plans were actually to build the windmill a little bit closer into town. And a couple problems. They found this land was not very solid to build the windmill on, and it was also had terrible winds because, as you know, there's a big hill right here that's going to block the wind. So Windmill Island ended up being out here. And Jaap was telling me they actually had to procure another property. They had secured the property here and not out here. So the city did a double job. And they have, these are fun pictures too. We have a lot of pictures of, so here we have Carter Brown. This is Ari de Koning. I'm not sure who this is. And then this is Mayor Bosman. They took boat rides around the swamp there to find the great place for Windmill Island. They're taking measurements and looking through. I'm sure they were pretty staged because they're fun to look at. But they figured it out. They built the mill. And then here we have, again, most of the Windmill Committee. We have Bill Wickers, Henry Mates, Mel Bosman, Carter Brown. This is Herb Holt, city manager. And this is a man named Jerry Fairbanks. So this is where the mill comes to Holland. So Herb Holt was the city manager for a couple of years. He was the second city manager of Holland. He was supportive of this project. But he hired someone to take on this project for him. That man, whose name was Jerry Fairbanks, actually, not Jaap de Blecourt. Jaap comes in just a minute. So Jerry Fairbanks is actually a man who, his father lived here in town, but he actually ran a ski resort up in Gaylord called the Sable Ski Ranch. He bought that back in 1956. So they hired him to get this project off the ground on a 1-year contract, and he only made it through his 1-year contract because in the meantime, the city hired this young gun to the right. So here again we have Bill Wickers, Deke Magendorf, and here's Jaap de Blecourt coming on board. So they hired Jaap as the grounds director. And Jaap, I'm not going to take his thunder because in the movie he tells about why and how he got here, but he was hired, and then he became, after a short time, he became the manager of Windmill Island when it opened. Again, to give them kudos, they paid off $450,000 worth of bonds, the equivalent of $4.5 million, with no tax money involved. Over Jaap's 30 years, they had 3.25 million visitors, which we joke because the city actually had gotten they hired some guy from the state, a consultant, and they said, should we do this? Is this a good project? The man's name was Frank Suggett. Are there any Frank's relatives here tonight? No? Okay, because Frank was a consultant, And he told the city, sure, the first year you open this place, you're gonna get 500,000 visitors, and it's only gonna go up from there. We had a record year 2 years ago, and we had 146,000 visitors. So, sorry, Mr. Suggett, you were very, very wrong. But yeah, it was an amazing job. The park opened April 3rd, 1965. So that's where, I think I'm at the end of my slides. Oh yeah, he also drew up, so he was in charge of drawing up all the plans for Windmill Island, which I'm jealous of. So here is the actual island itself with the windmill right here. This is the post house. So back in the ops day, you could do things like build an exit road from Windmill Island out to Windmill Waterfront Park. There's no way the DNR is ever going to let me do that. But he drew up these great plans, which we're still working on. This is that picture I mentioned. This is the windmill in the Netherlands, and this is our windmill today. This is the one, again, I like to show school groups, and they point out to me, that's not the same windmill, it's completely different. I say, yeah, it took us a lot of money to get it here and to rebuild it. And then people did get their thanks. This is when Mr. Wickers got to his retirement. This is Jaap giving Mr. and Mrs. Wickers a kind of a poster, and on it says, a mill for Bill. That same thing that was in the Dutch newspaper. And then here we have Mayor Bosman presenting wooden shoes, of course, what else, to Arnie Conan, the technical advisor, who did so much work getting them out here. So they didn't get their thanks. So I'm going to show you next what we're going to do is we have interviewed Jaap a couple weeks ago, and the city video folks were good enough to edit it. So we're going to show you that, and then we'll bring Jaap up, and then we'll come up and do a little question and answer. So I'm sure you're going to have more questions for Jaap. So I'm going to pop that interview on just a moment. It is closed captioned. The closed captioned are kind of small, so if you have a hard time seeing, feel free to move your chair somewhere. I'm from Windmill Island Gardens, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to sit down today with Jaap de Blecourt, who is the original manager of Windmill Island Gardens. So we're going to talk a little bit about his experience here and where the island's been over the years. So Jaap, could you tell us just a little bit about your life in the Netherlands, where you grew up, and how you got to the US of A?
I grew up in a little town, went to grade school. From grade school, I attended to the horticultural, elementary horticultural school in Paterswolde, really past the city of Groningen. But then it was the Second World War, and the Germans took possession of the school. The next thing, go to a high school then. I went to the high school for about 2 months, and then the Germans took that school too. So it was a complete loss here. So after the Second World War, when the Germans finally moved out of the Netherlands, the school became free. I went to my horticultural elementary school. It was for 4 years. First year was 2 days a week. The last 3 years was 3 days a week. So then, besides that, I went to evening high school, and I worked in the nursery nearby. With all of that, when I graduated, I did do an entrance exam in the horticulture school in Aalsmeer, which was near Amsterdam. After I graduated from that, I extended to go to another horticultural college. This was arboriculture. Graduated a year later from that. So I worked for a year in England. They came back. Then I went for a year to Versailles, outside of Paris. Worked in a nursery. I worked for a year. Very satisfactory. But not as well developed as all the nurseries I have known in the Netherlands. And in my home was a fellow from Switzerland. And he says, I'm traveling to Switzerland before and when I'm done with my traveling, I will settle in my father's business. So he gave me an address from Switzerland, and within 2 weeks I worked for them. So I worked for a big landscaping firm who did work all through Switzerland. And at the same time, former neighbors next door to my folks had immigrated to Chicago. I was good friends with their 2 sons. And I was in correspondence with them. So one day they came to visit my folks. And he said, would you like to come to America? I said, yeah, but I need a sponsor. Now we are going to need a sponsor. So it took me about 2 years. That's the reason that I stayed that long in Switzerland. So the time was up. My papers were all ready to immigrate within about 2 weeks. And I heard from the immigration office that Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island was looking for to being in charge of the gardens and the grounds for Grand Hotel. Well, I right away called my people back in Chicago. Right away I called back and I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to stay with you. They already had a remodel the house out of bedroom up to now. And he said, oh, I'm happy that you found a job. So I worked very satisfactorily in charge of the gardens and the grounds for Grand Hotel, also for the homes with the gardens around it, where the helpers were located. I got to know one girl who was in her last year of college to become a school teacher. So the next year she graduated and she came then to Mackinac Island in Grand Hotel when we wanted to get married. We do everything what he could, and he gave us a wonderful wedding. So after 2 years with our first daughter in the winter, everything was fine, everything was cool. Then spring came. Well, all the traffic on Mackinac Island is by horses. They want to keep it that way. So when my wife went for groceries and to the little girl room, you know, her eyes did all swell up. She hadn't could talk anymore. Well, she rushed her to the clinic and we gave her a shot, you know. And, well, months later we had the same thing again. And we kept her as much inside as possible. And he says, the doctor said, you have no other choice. For your daughter's sake, you will have to move.
But you have to explain why, though. What was wrong with your daughter? What did she have?
An allergy to horses. And all the travel on Mackinac Island come by horses. So he advised us to move. And my wife had become a school teacher on Mackinac Island. So it was kind of a double loss. That winter we went to the Netherlands. Our son was born in the Netherlands. When we came back, my wife said, what are you going to do? Well, I said, I have to let Grand Hotel know. So I sent a letter out to Michigan, to Kentucky Park Department, to Grand Rapids, to all of the Dutch people were settled in Michigan. First one, within 2 weeks, I heard from Holland Museum. And why don't you come over? Because we are looking for someone. We are going to build a windmill. We are looking for someone to develop the gardens and all that. So I came on Monday. They showed me supposedly where Windmill Island was going to be. They drove me to the end of 6th Street and I looked over at the shop and I said, well, where is it? And then, well, yeah, down over there. He says, we have bought land just down here at the end of 6th Street from 2 ladies who inherited the land from their parents. And it was all nice and dry. He had a man come over who was in charge of the windmills in the Netherlands. And then he came over because the city council asked him. And so he drove and he said, no. They said, we are planning to build a windmill. He said, you can't do that. That's too close to the cities. The city takes all the wind. You have to be in the open. Oh, no. We walked past that lake down there on the bottom of the hill, you know. And now a little walkway until we got to the grove here nearby, you know. And I says, well, he says, this would be the good place. This site is far enough away from not taking the wind away. I had to manage again to buy that from the man who lived near the edge.
But it's a little important to have wind for a windmill.
Yes, right. To make it short, I got hired in to to develop the gardens. So I came in October of 1964.
Can you talk a little bit about that difference? So you came to America to manage the grounds of the Grand Hotel, one of the most famous hotels in the country, and did that. And then a few years later, you find yourself having to move to a swamp.
Yeah. And also wage-wise, because after the first year, Mr. Woodfield, the owner of Grand Hotel, sent me a nice letter and says, don't worry about a thing, you have a job with Grand Hotel for your lifetime. Well, that sounded all very good. I started to work at $5,500 a year. The man in charge, who had been in charge of the parks in the city, was making less than he heard that I was getting $5,500. He was upset about it, so he had more coming than too.
When you brought your family to town and you showed your wife Windmill Island, was she impressed?
She says, for this you live back in Ireland. I said, no, with all the choices I have. Finally, when it opened, Prince Bernhard came in May 1964, and he was the one who he opened the windmill. It was a big celebration.
Was the island all set and ready by then? Was it all perfect?
Not yet.
That's what's amazing though when we talk is the challenges you went through and the things you built here, and here we are 60 years later.
Yeah.
And the post house is still here, the windmill. The bridge needs a little work, but many of the buildings after 60 years are still the highlights of the island.
And they all started out for $450,000. Yeah.
I tell people it's the best investment the city ever made.
Yeah.
We've had, I don't know if you know, we just added up this season, we've had over 5.5 million people visit Windmill Island Gardens over the years. Just a lot of them. So maybe tell, when we opened, the windmill was opened by Prince Bernhard, and shortly thereafter was tulip time. Maybe speak a little bit about that first tulip time and what that was like.
In the first tulip time, we had all extra people helping us. People in the windmill committee, and the mayor in town, Nelson Mosman. Then we had the people lined up almost from the blitz to get into the windmill. It was all new to us, and what the police department did very much helping the people after the tulip time parade was over to direct them to Windmill Island. Well, after a few years, they got tired of that. They directed them right away out of town. Now, then people, of course, said, who wants to go back, Well, then he went to other things like Dutch Village and the Ruby Shoe Factory.
When the island started, you had to pay back the bonds.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about the financials of the island. And like you said, the people never voted on it. How did they feel about this place that we didn't get 500,000 people a year like we were promised?
Well, the people found out. I got many letters. Just want to let you know that I'm opposed to it, that the place will be open on Sunday. Because after the windmill was ready to be used, the city council members had never thought about it, that it would be open on Sunday. Well, some of the council members were not in favor of it. But many people, who was a member, came. Well, now listen, we have no other choice, and it's ridiculous to think that it cannot be open on Sunday. And not that that's so much for it, that it's open on Sunday, but there's no other way. And so it opened on Sunday, but I did get some letters to my house in Holland Heights.
Well, it seems like you were always a master of making do. We never had quite enough to make it happen, but somehow you made it happen.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned Prince Bernhard came to open the mill.
Yeah.
And you told me there was a little incident that day. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. He came to the windmill, and he climbed the stairways, and you had walk in the gallery, and there had the ropes, where you could make the starting the windmill turn. But it wasn't fastened too well. Not knowing, I didn't know. But I was. in one of the things what held the ropes and all came down onto the people who were trying to pull it to make the windmill start turning. And did not get hurt, but it was quite a shock to me because it could have been much worse.
If you would have hit the governor or the prince from the Netherlands, you might have been in trouble.
Yeah.
I know one of the big movers behind getting the windmill was Will Wickers. Was he involved with Windmill Island? How did you work with Bill Wickers in those earlier years?
Bill Wickers, of course, was a member of the Windmill Committee, and he was also in charge of the museum.
Did Bill Wickers bring you new ideas? I know that I've heard the post box was from Bill Wickers that he found.
He had found it in one of the cities, and that thing is so heavy, you know. So Bill Wickers somehow talked him into it to bring it. But where was he going to put it? So finally, he found a place for it in Windmill Island, and I don't know if it's being used or not.
Yeah, and people, especially Dutch visitors, still recognize it. It's kind of like the blue police boxes for British people. Dutch people recognize the red mailbox.
Yeah. And then does it say brievenbus?
Brievenbus, yeah. We still collect the mail and we'll still bring it to the post office for you. It's still working.
Yeah.
And there's not many of them in the Netherlands today, I'm told.
No, the old Arab scrapped, yeah.
Was that hard a little bit now that there's not many people around anymore who are from the Netherlands, not many immigrants. So you have many people of my generation who have grandparents or great-grandparents from the Netherlands. Did Windmill Island start to change when you were there, of how they told the Dutch story or how they connected with people?
An awful lot of Dutch people came, especially when visitors from the Netherlands came to see the family in the US, you know. Many from Canada too. Yeah. Loads of Russians from Canada.
People who came after the war, the immigrants after the war, yeah. But it's exciting when we have lunch just to talk to you that we started at Windmill Island at about the same age with a young family, both of us.
Yeah.
And even where you're from in the Netherlands, that's where way back my family was from, only a few kilometers away. So to me, it's just exciting to have you here to share your stories. And after 60 years, Windmill Island continues to stay above water and continues to grow, but you built the lasting legacies. Well,
almost 95, so now we'll be 95 in November.
So you started in 1964. How old were you when you started in 64?
Well, I was born in 1930.
So 34 or so years old?
Yeah.
We're about the same age, yeah? So, you worked here for 35 years, and we know you visit on occasion in the summer. You check up on us.
Yeah.
Does it still feel the same? Does it feel a little bit different? How does it feel when you come back?
Oh, it feels different. Oh yeah. And it feels much improved. Yeah, many things have changed, but all for the good. Yeah.
There's always something to do here. Always something to make better, improve. Yeah. Well, I think you said that when you wrote up your plans for the island. You said that the island will continue to grow, but it'll never be done.
No.
It'll always be changing. To wrap it up, I just want to say thank you, Jaap. It's always fun to spend time with you. Having you start off the island for many years, as someone who's managing the island now, I appreciate the foundation you built, and it's always fun to hear your stories, and always fun to have you check up on us and see how we're doing now.
But I want to mention too that you're doing a very good job. So it is improved in so many ways, you know. Every improvement I made, you know.
I'm just trying to make it better every day. A little bit better, a little bit better.
Yeah.
Well, one second. Bring you up here now, yeah. There's a microphone for us.
Testing.
But this is kind of like I said, it's been cool. When we had originally we were going to just do an interview tonight, and we said really we want to get this on camera because it is a cool experience. For someone like me, there hasn't been very many. We laughed. There's been Jaap, and Matt. We're not good with long names. it's fun to be able to connect with someone who started the place 60 years ago. So we wanted to also give other people the opportunity to ask questions of Jaap, of whatever they want to know back to Windmill Island.
Yeah, I'm just gonna ask that once I ask a question, will you repeat it?
Oh, yes.
It is very nice to be here with all of you, and I see so many familiar faces. I should never forget that he was my grootmoeder sitting here near me. It's his brother and his other family members who helped to build the windmill. So I'm always very thankful for that.
We did one question.
I just want to make a comment. I'm Tony Peerbold. Horace was my dad, and I see that he was mentioned in your interview, but I've been, his name is on one of the plaques in the windmill too, but it's been really cool to be connected to that and hear some of his stories too, so I'm glad to hear, acquainted with him at least.
Morris was always very encouraging. He was the one who says, because first weekend that I came to visit Holland Museum, only one restaurant on 8th Street was open for 3 or 4 hours on Sunday, and nothing else was open. Now, Morris said, I see nothing wrong with it. So, he was all for it, to come to Windmill Island and see it grow. So, he was always a very good helper, standing beside me. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I know that there were some adventures trying to get the millwright over from the Netherlands. Were you involved with any of that? Because from what I understand, immigration was like, find one of the United States, and they were arguing there aren't any. Was that before your time there?
Well, what actually happened, I went for 2 years to follow a revenue management course. And I discovered a Dutch family and was able to talk the son into it to come to Holland, Michigan with his wife and the 3 children they had. And Dick Meendorp, who helped with building the windmill from the Netherlands, he, after the windmill opened up, for the biggest share of the year after that, he stayed with us. And John Juvel, who became after him in charge of the windmill, he trained him very much. So I trusted when Dick went after a year back to the Netherlands. So now John Juvel, well, I'm 95 years old. John Juvel and all of the people I have known and all of the ones we have seen here, they're all gone. Yeah, I'm not going to be 95 in November. So, I have been, my wife has been for many years. So, but after I retired, I was almost thinking maybe let me move back to the Netherlands. But then I realized that all my relatives were getting older too. Of course, they are all gone now. And so I decided to stay in Holland. And the kids, my 3 children, after we left Windmill Island, they grew up in the city. And my daughter was a teacher in New Detroit. And we have a son who works for a big building firm in Grand Rapids since college. And, yeah, my daughter is, and the eldest daughter is her own business in Chicago. So at Easter time, the all came on. So this past week I was very busy.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I remember that you and I had to translate the newspapers that came from the Netherlands. And one was a mill for a bill. And then when I was stuck, I translated some of the words about this mill, but you would help me translate that. And I remember when the letter came from the Netherlands, I think it was from the Netherlands, and it says, Mr. Rivers to start work for a mill that is to cost you money and it costs us time, and you already said no mill will be in the Netherlands anymore. The last one went to Aruba, and that's it. Mr. Rivers just went on with his work in the Netherlands. And sure enough, we succeeded. And I remember that you came to City Hall to help me translate. Do you remember that?
Yeah. The lady who was talking is Grace Anton, and she worked for Bill Wiggers for many, many years. So she worked in the City Hall too. And every morning, all the department heads would come to the City Hall to pick up their mail. So every day I almost had contact with Grace for many years until she retired. And I lost sight of her. I thought she had moved to Grand Rapids. All of a sudden today he is here. And she is my age too, so yeah, I was so surprised that I saw her.
Yeah, Linda.
I was curious what a visit to the windmill was like in those days. Like, where did a worker meet them? Was the worker in Dutch costume? Were they walked through the mill? Or just what was it like to be a visitor in your days at the mill?
Well, when Windmill Island opened up, we had built a windmill. The road system to it was actually not that well. It was well improved through the years. And a tool shed was built in the post house. In Alvin DeBos, a man in town who was retired, had a concession building in the back of the post house. But in the Netherlands, that room in the Netherlands was actually a stable. But and of course, the $450,000 by the time we opened up Windmill Island was gone. So the first years were not that easy, and I recognized very quickly after the first year that we would get many people for tulip time. So I started then, because I come from the city, I started then and traveled all through the US and went to many states and even into Canada to the tourist offices. I to drum up more business, and that increased Windmill Island at tulip time, at least in the late months through the summer, tremendously. So that was a big move. But after winter, I was on the road. Paul, the city manager, had never that I will do a thing like that. Well, I have no other choice. Otherwise, Windmill Island will go under. I've worked 7 days a week for about 10 years, every summer. Yeah. Whenever I look at winter shows,
Were you responsible for the greenhouse that's out there?
yeah, what actually happened, since we did not have any greenhouses on Windmill Island, we had to buy the flowers from the nurseries to plant in more flower beds. But the nursery grows had all the summer flowers ready to be sold. Well, I had to first wait until the tulips were blown out. So what happened, they would set it outside, cool, you know, and it grew and grew. Well, they would cut the tops off and then it sprout out again. I said, there's no other way. We have to have our own greenhouse. There's no other choice. So I had seen by driving to Grand Rapids, over the wall was a greenhouse.